And we are live with our 84th episode of Absolute AppSec. I am Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. As you can see this week, we are joined by our own brains, apparently, because we don't have... But there was some back and forth on whether or not we were actually going to do an episode, given that we didn't have a guest lined up. But I don't know, Ken and I like to get together and talk about AppSec topics anyway, hence the reason we started the whole podcast. I think originally we were only going to do guests every couple of episodes, if that, and it's turned into more. There's a lot of people to talk to and a lot of interesting things, interesting stuff that's out there. So anyway, we're back this week, and I will be at B-Side San Francisco next week doing the code review workshop. If you're going to be at the workshop, bring a code base with you. That's the whole idea. We're not going to do a full training of the secure code review framework and process, but we want to talk about, or we actually want to dig into code bases. That's the whole idea behind the workshop. So other than that, come join us at Black Hat, right, Ken? We'll be teaching our secure code review course. Come join us at Black Hat.
Oh.
Right? Ken's looking at links and stuff that he wants to talk about later. So, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Nope, you're fine. Black Hat, we are going to be teaching next level bug hunting, the code edition, where we'll be digging into source code and how we find bugs. It's a special edition of our secure code review course. Love everybody to be there. If you're going to be at Black Hat, please consider us. Otherwise, I don't think there's a lot else on the radar outside of the traditional Locomoco Sec bagging that I'm going to take this week. So we'll start. Yeah.
No, I would never do that to you. That's not very nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we can probably just jump straight into it. Yeah, exactly.
Which one do you want to begin with?
Past guests. Let's talk about Julian. He's moving, so he's no longer going to be in Australia. Julian Burton, who's been on the show and is a good friend of ours. He runs AppSec Day in Melbourne, Australia. You've probably heard about it if you've been on the podcast or if you've listened to the podcast in the past. Sounds like he's moving to. We haven't talked to him, directly about this, but he's moving to San Francisco, taking a new job. But one of his achievements before he's left was open sourcing Listo. And checklists are near and dear to our hearts as pen testers and as secure code reviewers. And so I'm excited to try this out. Ken, are you going to post that link up there?
I sure am.
Sure is. There's a Medium post detailing what Listo is all about. It sounds like it's used by Seek, the company that Julian used to work for to help prevent risks when building software, right? It's just basically a list of checklists and things that they have to do and have to apply to any code bases as they're going out. So, hey, there's some RFCs or tools and other things. But it's also it sounds like it's built on GoSDL that came out of Slack. And I know we've had discussions on that in the past, right? But adds just the ability to automate creation of those checklists. I know it does it within Trello, I think, is the...
Yeah, that's what I was reading, actually. Yeah, that it automatically will check off the requirements within the Trello board, and that basically they've got a list of, to go alongside with that, they've got a list of internal paved, we call paved path. They've said internal paved road, whatever, same thing. For which is dependencies and authorization sidecars and things like that. So that's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely...
Yeah, I can see it as being useful, right? I'd be interested in digging in and actually applying it to something like GitHub or something else, like an issues list. But I know a lot of people use Trello boards for those checklists. And I always think about it too as I'm doing the code review stuff, because one of the things we do in the code review course is we talk through the building of checklists, right? So I've got an application, I've got like a risk profile of that application, like what I think is risky, and then I'm going to check off a whole bunch of vulnerabilities and possible exploits or possible vulnerabilities based on what that risk profile looks like. So it'd be fairly easy to automate the building of those checklists based on kind of what we go through and what our baseline is, using something like Listo, right, or GoSDL or whatever else, right, rather than just having, hey, here's my markdown file that's got an honest to God checklist on it, right, of items. So
yeah, well, I think what's cool about this is it produces a risk. So this tool produces a risk score, and then you to do that, it follows some pretty like intuitive questions, I think, from an AppSec perspective, like things you'd ask, like, are you using a database? Do you have authorization? How are you, like, one of this shows, like, if you're doing authentication, how are you doing it? Are you so this 2 questions they show as examples are, we are only using preferred auth protocols and patterns stated within blah, 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 blah. And the other one's like, we are managing authentication secrets as per blah, 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 blah. And like, so you have these various options to then kind of like decide, what's this application? What technology is this application using? How is it using paved paths, paved roads, whatever you want to say, when it's doing that? Those types of things to produce a risk score, which I think is like probably the most valuable piece as somebody who has to constantly prioritize which applications receive assessments.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, we've talked about this quite a bit, right? Like, that's the whole, I mean, at the beginning of our framework, our code review framework is figuring out what the risk profile looks like, and, codifying that for your organization it is a solid thing to do to actually mature your program. So if you're not doing it, you should look into it. I mean, it's just another tool that could be useful in that, along with GoSDL, along with, the checklist that you have internally in spreadsheets and other things. But it'll help you, push left for, lack of a different term, or, as the hipster kids say nowadays, right? You're on mute, Ken.
Sorry, my Bluetooth kicked out again. Man, what's going on? Maybe I got low batteries or something. No, I was just laughing at you using the word hipsters and the kids and the hipsters, as they say, pushing
the kids
left.
These days. Yes, pushing left.
Yeah. Well,
so
like, honestly,
that's Julian. Congrats to him. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah. No, so where's he going? Do we know yet? I mean, I know he said he's moving.
No, I haven't heard anything.
Yeah. I remember him saying when we were in Australia that he was looking at, he might relocate. He wasn't sure. So, which I hope AppSec Day does continue. I know you and I were talking about that. I think Dan Ting, who we had an impromptu at the conference podcast about, or with rather, he's, I think, possibly picking up the torch on that. So, not sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he is. We should reach out and see how he's doing. Because he's a good guy, and it's overwhelming. Like, if you've ever organized a conference, you know that there's just so many moving pieces, and it's pretty much a thankless job for 2 to 3 days worth of program, right? The amount of time that you put into something like that can be somewhat insane when it comes down to being one of the top organizers. So.
You would know. You talk to these folks all the time for Hacker Tracker.
Yeah, I do. And I've got there's a bunch of other stuff coming up on Hacker Tracker too. I think besides Melbourne is going in, as well as KernelCon and Snowfrock, and there's a whole bunch of conferences going on. Like I'm getting to the point with Hacker Tracker where I wish I could go to all the conferences that they, I'm like, yeah, but there's just no way. Like it seems like it's every other week or something like that. There's a new conference we're loading in, and that's all over the country, if not world. So,
should we mention that RSA is happening?
RS what?
Yeah, exactly. Cool. That's that news for
today. I'm gonna be at B-Side San Francisco, and then There is another conference that happens after that. I don't know. A bunch of guys in suit coats and ties. That
if you have $250,000, you can get a keynote.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can, pay for a small table in the vendor area for something like, $50K, right? It's fine.
Sounds legit.
Yep.
Yeah. So that aside, other cool news, which Jerry Gamblin actually had posted this link in one of the mutual Slack chats we're all on. I'll paste it. I thought it was super interesting, and let me post this link. So this is about the CIA and their involvement in the. So I think if I read it correctly, let me make sure I don't implicate Germany. Yeah. So
that you don't implicate Germany.
Yeah, I know, right? All of Germany. Yeah. I'm bringing Germany down on this podcast accidentally. Yeah. No. So I guess the CIA, in partnership with West German intelligence, has been involved with for decades. Basically, they secretly owned, or at least, yeah, I'm not sure. It's not clear to me if they owned the entire company, or I think that is the case, right? The company didn't know, the employees supposedly didn't know that they were working for, obviously, these intelligence agencies. To intelligence agencies. But essentially what this company did, Crypto AG, was it went and it developed for decades, through equipment that rotated gears to create ciphers and build encryption, physical encryption devices, to, modern day sort of a crypto, which is pretty different. And also that's interesting because of how ubiquitous modern encryption technology is, that ultimately was kind of the downfall of the company for lack of efficacy. But anyways, so these people have been developing these devices or software for a long time, for decades, selling it to their customers. Their customers are like nation states, amongst other. I'm sure there are also just regular companies and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely some nations that were buying this equipment, and so they were effectively just backdoored from the beginning. The engineers supposedly, like I said, didn't know, but basically, it's been a way for code to be cracked, and messages to be read, and for more sort of over global surveillance, overreach type stuff. Yeah, and it doesn't surprise me, right?
Yeah, it seems like it harkens back to the Cold War, right? For sure, right? Everything starting in, the company itself was, started in 1940s is what it said, something like that, right?
Yeah,
and then, dang, right? That's this. This has always been my suspicion, right? And this always goes back to the time that NSA came out about DES, right? The digital encryption standard, that the first big kind of software encryption standard that was out there. And once the academics had cracked it, the NSA actually came through and said, yeah, we've known this for a while. And look here, you can actually improve your efficiency of cracking by, orders of magnitude if you do X, Y, and Z. So that, again, we talk about nation states, right? And protecting against that threat, which, as a company, if you were using one of these products, there's no protection against that, right?
Yeah, well, that's why the employees feel like they had interviewed a couple of employees that were just like, I feel awful. I've been building this equipment, selling this equipment, giving this to people I thought I was helping. And the entire time, unbeknownst to me, it's backdoored. And also, so this brought up a few points. In the article, they brought up a couple of good points, which is the morality aspect of when there were definitely situations where they're reading, there had to be anyways, they're reading this. So there's two things. One is either a lack of action or just just ignoring when nations that are engaged in like ethnic cleansing and assassination plots, and our country like knew that from reading messages, and then like, did we act on that? Like those are the types of questions. Like there are obviously horrible things going on. Clearly there were situations where we were reading messages knowing what was going on and when it was going to happen, and had how was that the case? Did we decide to not act? Was it? These are the questions that are a little bit difficult to ask and or to answer. And the other one is like those are kind of more like maybe if and buts, right? But what we do know for certain is that these people were the people that were selling this equipment and going around traveling. They didn't know that what they were selling. They 100% were in danger, right? Like there's no question they were at risk and they had no idea. So that's the other bit to that's. I mean, the whole thing is really interesting, but I think those two are some interesting points and questions that are gonna.
Hopefully. Yeah, you talk about spycraft. Well, and this is like, I don't know. And this goes to security at large, not necessarily application security in general, but like I've always thought like there's the NSA, CIA, whatever like branch that does Alcatel or whatever like that investment firm, Incutel. Yeah, Incutel,
I was going to say Alcatel. I used to work on those switches and when I was in the Navy.
No, that's not that. In Incutel, which is basically a fund for the government, like these different agencies to fund startups, right? And I've always thought that like if you were really practicing this and you were really looking at things like observation, network traffic, crypto in general, like being able to actually view communications, like I wouldn't be surprised if you had a bunch of these VPN providers that are, specific to the government or actually owned by a government agency, like some sort of shady, just because information is power at this point, right?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is like on TV they always show the hacker who's like they've got like Nmap running or whatever, and then they're profusely sweating and take a bite of some pizza, and then they're like, I'm in. I got past the firewall. I got past this, that, and the other. But I mean, the reality of it is like, yeah, I honestly believe most software and devices are backdoored. That's what I think. I that's 100% like in my mind. That's more of a likely scenario. And then in that case, it's just a matter of, what's the target, what's the IP, and you're in, right? It's not like some, because think about it. What's the easy? Does it really make sense to sit there and like try and break through all these, or even just launch a phishing campaign, and hope that works out? Does it really make sense, or does it just make sense if you're a nation state to just backdoor everything? Software, encryption, devices, like you said, own companies that are, hopping points for traffic. Yeah, in my mind, it's like all pretty much compromised. So,
well, and I don't know. This always goes back to the discussion we have about risk profiling things, right? Like what is it that you're trying to protect against? As an AppSec guy, like I'm sitting at my job, I've got like a product that I'm trying to secure. Like it always comes down to how many resources do you want to throw at something, and how secure do you need it to be, right? It's a cost benefit analysis. It's a business decision, and you can't get too hung up on the business deciding, hey, guess what? It doesn't make sense for us to buy that WAF, right? Because the product that you're trying to protect is a public website, doesn't take a lot of input, right? Like you can help them, you can guide them down those sorts of decisions, but realistically, if a nation state is coming after you, right? A nation state is coming after you, and there's probably not a lot that you can do about it. I mean, we see this in, WhatsApp, Facebook, and like trying to get into China and other places. You see it in Google backing out of China, right? Like as you're fighting against somebody that has what equates to unlimited resources, you're never going to win that security battle, right? You just have to kind of pick the hill that you want to die on and call it from there, right? Yeah,
So here's a question.
I feel like that's kind of a nihilistic view of things, but I don't think that you can really. I've always felt like you can't protect against a nation state in the same way that you can protect against, criminals, right? Threat actors that are on the criminal level that are trying to exploit data or sell data, something along those lines. So, what were you going to ask?
Do you think that, like keeping the tinfoil hat on, do you think that nation states have employees inside of major companies like Google, Facebook, et cetera, to then like get access to data that they like? That's always been something that goes on in the back of my mind, is like, do these companies, have folks that, like employed by a nation state?
I would be surprised if there wasn't, right?
Right. Yeah, that's what I think.
I mean, like take the flip scenario. I mean, I know we want to, think that Google and Facebook are, this great, whatever, like they're a secure organization, but you look at the number of people that they hire from a technical perspective. They come from all over the world. They have offices all over the world. It wouldn't be hard to get an asset in there, or, there's always somebody that's struggling. I mean, that's basic kind of, like, I know this is taking a weird turn for Absolute AppSec.
Yeah, let's go. Let's get weird. It's Tuesday. Let's get weird.
But it's like, I know you're talking, we're talking almost like spycraft, but at the same time, it's information gathering, right? Like, we know that the NSA has data centers where they're storing internet data and combing through it, right? Like that is known. So what would be the harm in their perspective, or in their view, of tapping a resource internal to an organization, right? Or
yeah, I guess
inserting a resource internal to an organization, especially if it wasn't here in the States. There's certain.
Well, yeah, because that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking of other nations outside the U.S. trying to plant people into, the big like company, especially Google comes to mind, just because they house so much information about everyone. I mean, that's part of why their forgot password functionality is so well implemented and like solid, is because they have so much information on you that they can do quite a bit to just verify you are who you say you are, versus like, only having a few data points that most companies might have, maybe even a couple. So,
yeah. And that's only one step removed from what went on with this, the crypto AG or whatever it is, right?
Right. Yep.
It is. So yeah, like, you've got the employees that know nothing about it, and they're going to, I mean, you would feel crappy too, right? I'm working on a security product. I'm trying to like make this as, efficient as possible and as secure for people. Like, I secure the world's communications, and then it comes out that, well, you did from everyone but this one big actor over here that actually paid your salary, right? And so like, you would feel pretty devastated. Like, I can totally understand those guys being like, sorry, right? Like, so it's interesting that comes out. I mean, I know it's going to do nothing but stoke the fears of, the rest of the world about the CIA and the NSA and, other organizations. But like, we do the same thing, right? Like, I know for a fact that there's government organizations in the U.S. that won't purchase products like security products from Israel because it's a foreign state, and they don't trust that Israel hasn't backdoored those products. It's a valid fear. So,
yeah. Well, after the WhatsApp revelation, man, that's a real. I mean, for those that are listening that don't know what we're talking about, effectively, WhatsApp was backdoored. So I believe if you sent like, I don't know what data, maybe it's an image or some whatever, to somebody's phone that's running WhatsApp, it's automatically backdoored and compromised. Like, that came out. What was that like? Was that like 4 months ago or something like that?
Yeah. Let's see.
Something
I'm
like
sure
that.
we can pick that up.
Wow, this episode took a weird turn, but whatever.
Well, okay, so like,
I like
and
it.
this goes directly into actually the next story that we've got on our list, right? So when you are attacked by a foreign entity, by a nation state, how do you respond? And
Usually you're like, what can we do?
yes. And then, but, the FBI just came out, was it yesterday or the day before, with, another like, hey, there's these 4 Chinese nationals that are most wanted. And like,
This is Equifax.
Yeah. And it's based on the Equifax breach. Respond with gusto. With gusto, says Ken. Yes, you are absolutely right. But yeah, like those foreign nationals. Guess what? They were probably never coming to the U.S. anyway.
No.
Right? There's been a lot of talk, like about like there's the 4 pictures, the 4 guys, and the one guy is just like a black image, right?
Just a bust.
The bust. The one guy who has, like, what was it? Jerry was saying, the one guy who actually knew how to do AppSec, the rest of them don't, right?
Oh yeah. That's no, I think it's crazy. Like I don't know that I've seen this before where they've I'm sure there's I don't know everything that goes on. So, I'm sure this has happened before, but it seems like usually when some hacking group claims response, or it's originating from, well, first of all, anytime it's originating from China, there's always that suspicion that it's just being proxied through China. So there's that. But then it's usually you don't see them call out individuals, which is like, how did they find out? That's one interesting detail I didn't see listed here or discussed. I
don't think there's they haven't come out and actually said that, right? I mean, there's Chinese PLA members, right?
They said they tracked the crime's digital breadcrumbs.
Digital breadcrumbs. So it is like we're in an episode of CSI. Got it. They haven't released that, and I doubt they will. So the question is, right, like, what does this actually do? As far as
feels like a political statement more than anything else.
Does it actually make us more secure? Like these people probably like they were never going to come to the U.S. They work for a military organization. Yes, they did attack a consumer Equifax bureau a business. But again, they're like I don't get what the thinking is behind this. Outside of it kind of tips our hand that, hey, we know what you did. We know that these people are involved. It's the whole idea of a cyber arms race or something like that, I guess, that we can identify who your members are.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Because we can't go after. I mean, it's like we can go after China, right? The People's Liberation Army or whatever it is. It's not like we can go after the nation itself. It's just not feasible. But this is like the thing that you can do to be a pain in their ass, right? Like you can go ahead and have these attacks go on, but know that we're going to call out your people. And but at the same time, like you said, does it really affect those people? I mean, does it? I guess in a way, like it would be from now on unsafe to travel for them to travel outside of China, and then possibly they're looking over their backs inside of China. I don't know, but the Chinese government's like good old pat on the back to them. They don't give a shit. Like they're not like, wagging their finger. You shouldn't have. They sponsored these people to do this. If it's even those folks, right? Like,
yeah. I don't know. I mean, if it was, they probably got a bonus for what happened, and that's the whole point of these state-sponsored hacking groups over there, is gathering that data. And I don't know, the fact that the FBI came out and said this really confirms that, the suspicions that I had initially was, hey, we never saw this data show up on the dark web, right? We never did. So it's a nation state that's gathering information about U.S. consumers and U.S. individuals, which, like, I mean, it's just confirmation of that they took it to the point that they could dump that much data just so that they could drop it into a big database somewhere and use it in future attacks or for future purposes or something along those lines. So I'm sure there's going to be more that comes out of this, right? There's got to be more revelations eventually, or it may just disappear. Those guys just may end up on that list for the foreseeable future. And I don't know. The other thing that's interesting,
oh man, dude, I just realized. So, because we had talked about, I'm sorry to interrupt, but something just dawned on me from reading this article. We had actually talked about, I'm pretty sure on the podcast, when especially we were talking about like either Equifax or one of these healthcare breaches. We were talking about the fact that like, what's the value in that data? And I remember specifically us talking about how it could be used as a way to target people, as a means to like compromise an asset, right? Like for intelligence gathering purposes. So you compromise, essentially, like you dig up dirt on somebody, you compromise that, or you find people that like they're in, they have like debt, for instance, and then you find their weakness, and debt's the issue, or their kids got some medical condition. It's exploiting some weakness that somebody might have to like go ahead and turn that asset, essentially, right? That's one of the reasons when you go through a clearance, like you can't have massive debt, you can't have like assets overseas, like there's all these things, right? They check on. Anyways, but what's interesting is they actually said this data has economic, who's Barr? Yeah. So U.S. Attorney General William Barr said this data has economic value and these thefts can feed China's development of artificial intelligence tools. Okay, maybe. But maybe, yeah. But the other part is, it says, as well as the creation of intelligence targeting packages.
Yeah.
So like for me, that's confirmation that what we were talking about is like a real feasible. It's really feasible. It's a true possibility. Oh, that's a good question. Ken Toller said, I see you responding. Wonder if they include student debt. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Because anything that that makes somebody alive, interesting asset.
So to go back into the crypto AG story, right? Like I could probably tell, hey, I don't know, like it's almost like we're getting back from like, software to almost wetware exploits, right? Like wetware, like people exploits. Because if we can put together enough information like this, then we can take advantage. Hey, guess what? I know that, Ken works at GitHub, right? Works at Microsoft. He has problems with debt, right? And like X, Y, and Z, he's in a higher level, like, or a trusted capacity in this organization. Maybe I don't need to go hire somebody on as a low-level employee at Microsoft. I can go to Ken directly, right? Like you're almost
creating,
like we're almost seeing that play out between these two stories, right? That the government has done this, like the U.S. government, the Chinese government. This is the way that they operate.
Well, they've got the data points for it, right? They have the OPM, the Office of Personnel Management. So they have the people that are working inside the government. Then they have the healthcare data that they've stolen. Plus, they've got the Equifax data. You have basically all of and there's probably countless other breaches that we have not even heard about that were hush money paid off, or just like not discussed so that the company doesn't look bad. So you take all those data points together. Yeah, you have a really solid way to target people, to flip them for your whatever your gain is, whatever your end goal is. That's scary, man. That's the one that's like, yeah, that's very, very scary.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like we've always said that they would. I mean,
so do you think, here's another question. Do you think now our government's taking that same data, trying to formulate who might be likely targets for these, for that?
If we're not, then it's a weakness that we need to know about, right?
Yeah.
Like but that's the funny thing is I don't know, right? Like if they can get a hold of that breach data, like a foreign government can get a hold of it, but then the companies lock that all up, and the like our government can't get a hold of it. It's almost like we've got a blind spot there. I'm sure they've got other analysis that they run and background checks and other things like that on employees in sensitive locations. But you don't always run that against third-party providers, like you know, people working at Google or some other place like that. You trust that they run background checks and they make sure that their people are, you know, whatever, qualified to be there. But it's not going to be the same
questionnaire.
Yeah, it's not the same level of scrutiny. So, yeah, I don't know, right? Like, I mean, I trust. Well, I'm sure that the NSA and the CIA that they're running, you know, their own data analytics on things. But whether or not they're arriving at the same conclusions would be. It is impossible to say because no one's number one going to admit that they're doing it, even though that they are. And number two, they're not going to share results with each other. Right. I don't know. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah,
it is crazy.
It really is crazy.
Well, I'm like, oh gosh. Yeah. I mean, and this, like, so on the positive side of all this, the silver lining, and going back to that crypto AG story with the CIA, I do think it's super interesting that that it says like essentially that, you know, how for instance, like Signal and various, you know, apps that implement crypto to keep you to keep your privacy, to keep you private, to keep your data private. Sorry. I'm getting tongue-tied. I think that's interesting that kind of rendered crypto AG obsolete. Like that's an interesting sort of take on it. That that like all these modern apps and all these modern standards are like, and open source is, I would almost say open source, right? Like that's really kind of ruining this whole like proprietary crypto devices / software for a company like Crypto AG. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know. Like maybe that's yeah.
Well, it sounded like from that article, it sounded like, I mean, Crypto AG had gone away, right? Because they weren't able to sell hardware devices anymore, but there was still portions of the company that had been sucked up by other crypto experts or, you know, places that, specialized in crypto. So, but then again, right, you see the government so heavily involved with cryptographic standards as well, right? So, you know, you got to wonder if there's, I mean, there's experts there, right? Like, you know, that there's math geeks in the government that are looking at ways to speed up, you know, cracking of password hashes or, you know, exposure of keys or whatever else, right? And, you know, the amount of money that both us and the Chinese throw at those like research institutes, right? I'm sure there's stuff that's going on there that we just don't know about that, you know, definitely impacts our privacy. But again, it's a nation state, right? Like we would never leave the house if that's all that we thought about. Like realistically, right? You would only communicate face to face, and even then, right? Like it just is like this whole cascade of stuff that you would try to do to prevent other people from seeing what you're doing, and so that's where it ends up defaulting to. Well, if you don't do anything that's not like bad, then you don't have to worry about it. But Yeah.
And yeah, but you know, again, it's like this. So this goes back to the whole discussion we had. I mean, we've talked about it on the podcast a couple times, but like the fact that people have become so, including myself, so comfortable with like, you know, like Echo devices and Google Home and Nest cameras and like, yeah. But my mom had this. Speaking of that, my mom had this. As an aside, my mom had this like cheap camera she had bought from China.
Yeah.
I upgraded her system for her as a present, but yeah, she like you couldn't even do 2-factor auth. I was looking at this thing and I'm just like, that thing is definitely like suspect. I would never. Where did you get this again? So like, why would you put this in your house? Made in China, cool. But yeah, we've gotten so comfortable with like, well, yeah, I guess that's the thing is like the trade-off of comfort for privacy and security. So that is our decision. But like our kids are being now indoctrinated into an environment where that's normal and they won't think twice about it.
Yeah, there's no expectation there of privacy, right? Like not only that, but they have a tendency to overshare with, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of people on social media. And like, even if they're, you know, even if they have a private profile on some of those, it's, you know, it's everybody that's in their school or whatever else, right? It's not. So that expectation of privacy, like that doesn't exist for them, right?
And everybody wants to be safe too, right? You see the pushing for, you know, like basically anytime anything bad happens, the immediate reaction these days is to like, you know, naturally to want to be safe, to basically give up freedoms. I've noticed this, and I won't get into any like political debates about any certain things, but I'll just say that like I've definitely witnessed that where people are trading safety and comfort for personal privacy and freedom, and it's becoming increasingly normal for folks. And as a American, somebody who does believe in freedom, it's a little bit sometimes concerning. And so it's something I've been struggling with, is whether or not I want to rip out these devices and explain to my son, you shouldn't trust everybody to just take care of you. And you should be a little concerned about privacy, and don't ever trade your freedoms for comfort and safety.
Yeah, but it also goes into a whole bunch of other things, right? Like, I don't know, it's been a few years, but you're starting to see this kind of rise of monitoring. Like, you've got like the whole facial recognition thing with things with cameras. You've got the whole like Ring network of, cameras that are looking at outside of people's houses and tracking, like actual AI that tracks people and faces and tries to identify who they are. And, at some point, I know that they're going to tie in. It's similar to, how Nest works, right? It sees your network in your house and it doesn't notify you of motion.
Mm-hmm.
But the second that you leave, it flips all that stuff on. So at that point, you're trusting Google to know where you're at any given time to, for a convenience.
What your habits are, what you're doing when you're home.
Yep. And so at that point, they not only have like, oh, okay, I've got facial recognition for this person coming in and out of the house and the cameras that are on them, but I have an electronic signature for them as well. So at what point does like Google, with Google Wi-Fi start to tie that into hey, guess what? We've got, this network that is, spread out all over the city. We can just track wherever you go, right? And we already have the device, and you already are giving that to AT&T or whoever your cell phone provider is. But this whole like surveillance state is, it's already here in a lot of places.
It's already here. Yeah. It's just not in the form of obvious government, right? Like, it's not like obviously the government, it's big companies.
Yeah. And as big companies like suck up, other small companies that are making innovations in different spaces. I like Yeah. We've taken a really weird turn this week. But
I don't care. It's, you know,
I know.
supposedly
it's our podcast. So
yeah. We should change this to the allegedly AppSec podcast.
Allegedly AppSec.
That's okay
Maybe
with
that'll
me.
be the title of this week. Allegedly AppSec.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I always try to tie that back to a day-to-day basis. And like, I mean, I know that Google no longer has the do no evil or whatever motto that they used to, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's difficult because okay, so I run I run Hacker Tracker for DEF CON, right? And so there's a modicum of trust that goes along with that anybody that installs that, I mean, especially the first couple of years, the only place that it was useful was at DEF CON, right? So if you're installing that application, most likely you are at DEF CON and you're involved in that community at some level, right? Like there's a whole bunch that goes along with that. Now, it doesn't mean that you couldn't actually go to DEF CON and monitor electronic signatures anyway, or AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile, they all know that you're there as it is. But having something installed on those devices, like I can see like the temptation to, hey, take advantage of that in some way, right? Like it would be easy to actually, hey, like, who is it that's there? Oh, I'm just running analytics. I'm actually seeing like what kind of devices these people have, where else they have been, right? That kind of thing would be like, it's a slippery slope. And it's actually a discussion that I've been having with the other guys that build Hacker Tracker. Is like, I don't know if we want to go this direction. Like, I don't know if we want to keep this level of data and have this constant interaction with like the Google Firebase on the back end, because Firebase is now owned by Google, right? And so at that point, right, like, do we roll back and give up some of those convenience features that we have as developers for privacy? And I'm sure that the DEF CON crowd and the EFF crowd is going to say yes, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, that's probably the direction that we will end up going. But on the flip side, I'm like, man, but do you understand how easy this makes my life to actually provide you with a service, right? Because it's the things that you want to see. It's the data updates. It's the, hey, you're just trying to navigate a conference and you want to be able to know that this event changed from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. or whatever it is, right? It makes your life easier. It makes my life easier if I don't have to develop the whole backend infrastructure for that. But you give up a modicum of privacy when you do that. So
100%. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No, that's the that's the trade-off, man. That's like that bringing it back to AppSec. That's one of the things that is so appealing about including a library to get your app to do something. Like if you want to OAuth to or SAML to some external provider to like have your users share something on social media or whatever the case is, what are you going to do? You're going to go for the language that you're building in, and you're going to find a library and you're going to read the README and implement it. And I mean, you're trusting that code's safe and that code's secure. Well, you're hoping that code's safe and secure, right? And it's not backdoored, that it's not purposefully built, Again, the paranoia tinfoil hat piece there. But that is like the way it goes with when building apps. Most likely you're going to go look at whatever libraries are popular. Ron Paris last week was talking about Linus's quote about, having a bunch of eyes on, having the more eyes on software, essentially, the more likely that bugs are to be uncovered. Versus like writing that entire library yourself.
Yeah. It's a convenience thing as a developer, right? Like we use frameworks, we use platforms. And okay, so this again goes back to the whole crypto AG thing, right? Like, that was a physical manifestation of a crypto library. That's all that it was. So like, who's not to say that there isn't an OAuth library out there for Node or for JavaScript that is, built by the NSA or a division of the NSA or someone that works for the NSA that just happens to like push things out. And like, I don't think we do enough analysis on that. We trust it because it has 500 stars on GitHub, and it's the most popular repository, or it has that one feature that we wanted to use. So it's not just services like VPNs and, chat software that like we're probably worried about. The government knows how stuff is built, right? Like they employ people that build software just like any other large organization does. And they're going to be analysts. They're going to be looking at ways to take advantage of that so they can get the information that they want, just like they did with the crypto AG. So,
yeah, it's a weird world we're living in.
Yeah, it is. It is strange, right? And most of the time that we deal with those third-party libraries as developers, it's more about like reliability and feature set than anything else. But we don't necessarily dig into security, right? Like we just don't. We keep it up to date. We see the CVs as they pop up, and maybe somebody goes in and analyzes it because they, Ron, those guys, they work for NPM and they see, hey, this is becoming very popular. Maybe they go look at that software to make sure that it's not sending something off somewhere else. They're looking at the metadata around it, that kind of thing, to try and keep people safe. But realistically, when it comes down to your software and, 95 or 97% of it is something that you didn't write, there's probably pieces in there that aren't what you intend.
That's this. Ken Toller's quote is hilarious. So I'm going to read it. He said, "Application libraries are like the party in college you had when you invited 2 of your closest friends and ended up with 1,000 people in a 5x5 dorm room and more problems than you can handle in a 4-hour period." Pretty much the most exact description of the state of library usage in modern web applications that I've ever seen. So.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. It's a popular, it's a popularity contest, right? Like, how many times?
By the way, if you have 500 stars on GitHub, you're safe.
If you are safe,
trust me. No,
Ken knows. He's looked at all the projects that have 500 stars and above.
If you have 499 stars, you're shit. But if you have 500, no, I'm kidding, obviously.
No, okay. So, and then this goes back to other, the left pad, right? That issue that came up where the guy pulled left pad from NPM and it broke all this software. Okay. But that's one thing, like, hey, really, you could have coded that yourself. But, and I realize that we can say that about anything, but that highlights the issue that we have, that it's not about functional software. It's about popular software, right? It's about popular libraries. So if you're the first one to offer up an OAuth library for, say, Go, right? Most likely you're going to be the most popular OAuth software for Go forever, because people will use you. As long as it's functional and it works, people will use you. So even if somebody comes and re-implements it in a better, more secure way, most likely the projects are going to keep using that old version because it's the one that they've used and it's the one that's most popular, rather than, hey, it provides the best feature set, or it provides the most secure implementation, whatever else that you want to talk about.
Yeah, which is why Adam Baldwin and Ron Paris were talking about, because Adam Baldwin had a tweet about this. Gosh, what was it? I'm trying to find it. Sorry, okay. Yeah. So Adam said, security reviews of open source projects are valid contributions, just like documentation. Well, there's more to it. He said, if you review something and don't find anything, reaching out to the maintainers to let them know is also valuable. But that first part, the security reviews of open source projects are valid contributions. Absolutely. More power to that. Like that's the whole point of open source, right? I mean, you should be able to look at the source and make things better, and tweak it as needed and have transparency. Like I think the transparency is the big part of that. So if we could leave anybody with anything, it would be get out there and
take Seth's approach, find the popular one, the one that's been around for a long time, and then look at it. And if you find anything, let the maintainers know.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, that's this workshop that we're going to run at B-Sides, right? Like, that's what I'm hoping that we get out of that is, like, we're going to look at some open source software and find some shit and actually report it back, and start instigating a change there. Because that's the whole philosophy behind open source. But if you've ever run an open source project, you know that there's only a handful of open source projects that get any sort of outside help, right? It's typically the maintainer, and that's it.
Yep. I've been the very sad person on that end for many projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have, right? And that was where, what was it, hunter.dev, right? They're trying to change that a little bit. That's not it. What's the name of it? There's that new bounty site that's basically, isn't that what it's called? Hunter.dev or something like that? Crap, I can't find it. Yeah, but it's basically, that's basically the idea is they put out bounties for features and security issues in open source projects, and a developer can go and claim that bounty, fix the code, and get paid for it, right? But that premise is all built on the fact that those issues are known in that software, right? So it's not necessarily we're finding new bugs, we're actually just going in and fixing the ones that are already known. Did you find that? Hunter.io.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay.
I'll post that link. I can find the right screen to post it in. Too many tabs.
Maybe it is. Hunter lets you find email addresses in seconds and connect with people that matter for your business. No, that's not it.
No, it's not it?
No.
Find email.
No. Program.
Oh God, that's what happens when you don't read. Oh gosh, let me see if I can remove this. I could put my user in a timeout, but I can't remove this.
Oh, really? On
the just put ignore on there.
I think I can remove it. I retracted it.
Very cool. Thanks.
Nice try. He was trying to social engineer us there.
I know, right?
He did put a question mark. You're right. We'll find it. We'll post the link to it. And what was the point that I was trying to make? Like now I'm. Yeah. But okay. So the point that I was trying to make was that, like, that's probably a better use of our time, right? You know, if we can, it's just the fact that it's probably not necessarily paid, right? That's the difficult thing. It's better to find the exploits, go actually exploit them across, you know, hey, you do find a popular library that's used by, you know, most new startups. They probably have a bug bounty that's associated with them, right? If you find a bug that's in that software, you can probably go through and actually make some money that way by exploiting whatever bug it is that you actually find. But that's taking into account that it's exploitable, right? And that's not always going to be the case with bugs that you find when you're looking at source code. It's going to take, there's usually 90% of the bugs that I see in source probably aren't fully exploitable, even though it's going to take some conditions or something else has to happen, or input validation on the front end has to be broken in this way to actually exploit, right? So it becomes more of a reliability issue than it does a security issue. So at that point, is it really a bug? Do they even care if you're going to report it or not? Because it can, you know, it takes some enterprising bug bounty person to actually figure out how it can be exploited and taken advantage of, or if it's been inserted in there by someone that's trying to do a backdoor. Right? Anyway, I'm kind of ranting. You know, it's the nihilist in me coming out that everything's, you know, the worst. So
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I know you are. Where's Stefan when we need him? You know, Oh,
he's off saying some words I can't understand.
We didn't even talk about Shadow and the
Shadow.
The app from the Iowa
What?
caucus.
Oh God, how do we miss that? Oh, well, tell you what, let's put that on the back burner for the next, because we're trying to schedule in, because actually I got feedback that people like the ones that are just us as well. So I'm trying to schedule. Yeah, we've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hey, we got 5 weeks of guests. So yeah, maybe on the 6th week we talk about this. I don't know. Maybe we just bring it up casually. And then one of the next like set that up for as a talking point for one of our guests, or we cover that.
I think I'm right. I think it is Hunter, HUNTR.dev.
Just not, maybe it's down.
Yeah, I'm getting a resolution on it, but I think the system that I'm at, had redirected dev sites at one point, so that might be my own issue.
Oh yeah, I've done that before. Yeah. I'll figure it out. I can put it in the show notes.
Yep. No, it's the first bug bounty board for securing open source code, right? It is hunter.dev and huntr.dev.
It doesn't work for me, and I would bet it's the same thing. I think I did some like hacky workaround for .dev at some point.
Yep.
So
let me see. I'm going to throw it up there though.
Yeah.
So you should, if you haven't looked at it, you should check it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's an interesting take, right? Like, hey, there's vulnerabilities that are out there in open source code. Go get paid for them. The issue that I have is I look at it and I'm like, look, you're paying $25, right, to fix a vulnerability. Yeah, a vulnerability that you just paid a bug bounty person, $500-600 to find. I feel like the economics are still off a little bit there, but maybe not, right? Like if they're doing proper, scoping of how much time it takes to actually fix those vulnerabilities, it could be interesting. So I want to dig into that one a little bit more at some point. But so you were talking about upcoming episodes. Sounds like we've got guests lined up for a fair bit. At some point we may actually just start pulling off a half hour here and there to record another episode. If there's something super interesting, we could do that. Just depends on the timeline and what you and I have going on.
We know who we have next week.
Who do we have next week?
David Lindner.
We can talk about. We can definitely talk about Shadow then, because I know he's
from Iowa.
Yeah, he's from Iowa,
yeah.
But he got a copy of the APK and actually they pulled it apart, and yeah, there's some good juicy stuff there. So let's talk about that. And I almost want to pull Kevin Cody in as well to talk through it. We haven't seen or talked to Kevin for a while either, but yeah, there's all sorts of crazy that's going on with that as well. So there's a lot going on. So you got to stay safe out there, right?
Just don't use the internet and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Right. Send
Stop
me an email.
This show and get offline.
Yeah, I'll send you a tinfoil hat. Yeah.
Cyclical. We do have a pretty awesome lineup for the next 5 weeks, but yeah, we can definitely. I'll reach out to Dave and have him prepped and primed for that talking point next week.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Sweet.
And by prepped and primed, I'm going to say we're going to talk about this next week.
Sure. Sweet. Well, yeah, we've been going for an hour. I mean, I know you and I can talk for hours if we need to, but yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on. Please reach out to us if you've been on the show and don't have a shirt or any swag left yet. Oh, yeah. We have new swag. We'll send it to you. Please come up if you're going to be in San Francisco for B-Sides or that other conference that's there. Let me know. Love to meet up with people and say hi. And yeah, jump into the Slack channel. Let us know what you think of the episodes, or if you've got other topics that you want us to address. We'd love to do that. Or ping us on Twitter.
Dope. Fun times.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Later. Bye.